Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast with Sage Breslin. With us today, she is founder at Sage Wisdom Institute and the Healing Heart Center Foundation. We're going to talk about coaching, psychotherapy, a bunch of interesting topics. I'm really excited to get into it. Sage has a very cool look, as you will see when she will start speaking. First time I see that. And yeah, restoring old soul women to empowerment and joy following repeating interaction with toxic narcissists. That's very interesting. We're going to talk about that. Authenticity, cancer journey. That's another interesting one. Breakthrough coaching, leadership development. This podcast is brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one. If you want to learn from people like Sage, if you want to network with people that you wouldn't get the opportunity to network with normally, that was a long sentence, and to get some leads and clients, even a podcast can allow you to do that. So podpire.com. Sage, welcome to the pod. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and about your companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a licensed psychologist by trade. I started out as a trauma psychologist and did that for many, many years until I ended up developing, for some reasons that we may get into later, multiple myeloma, which is bone marrow cancer. And at that point in time, I really needed to retool and reconfigure my life to work in the best way I could. And I did a lot of deep diving and soul searching and found a different way of being in the world of work that also helped me thrive even as a cancer survivor. And that is through breakthrough coaching and working now with what we just playfully refer to as toxic relationship repeat offenders. So, and I'm happy to talk all about the ROSE system and how it works and what I do and all that, and when we get to that. But
let's start chronologically with cancer, which is a terrible disease. It affects more than 40% of the population at some point. How has been that journey for you, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, it's been interesting, I guess would be my words. I've been in this for about 7 years, almost 8 now. And, I felt exhausted a lot of the time. And what I do for a living requires a lot of concentration and focus and, really being present and mindful. And I just noticed that I was really struggling with those things and that I could get to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it wasn't like, oh, my coffee's worn off or my lunch is worn off. I want to take a nap. It was, I couldn't get in my car and drive home. And I saw one doctor after another who all said, there's nothing wrong with you. We've done these tests, la, 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 la. There's nothing wrong with you. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe we should give you some antidepressant medication. To which I said, I've just gotten divorced. I'm not depressed anymore. I'm doing great. The world is my oyster. That is not it. But nobody would listen. And I finally had what they consider a life-threatening cardiac event. My blood pressure went up to 210 over 105, and they were afraid I was going to have a stroke. So I ended up in the hospital. And after, $1 million worth of testing off and on for 8 weeks, they said, there's nothing wrong with your cardiac health other than you've had some scarring on your heart. And I said, yeah, I know that. I know that I don't have a cardiac issue. And they said, well, you're depressed. And they were just about to discharge me from the hospital, and that, sent in the social worker to try to, help me understand depression. Now I'm a trauma psychologist and I have been for 30 years at this point, right? So I'm a little bit up to here with them. And I send him out of the room. I said, we'd have nothing more to speak about. And in walks the hospitalist. And she said, there is something weird here on your tests. You have no white blood cell count. This is really, really unusual. We think there may be some problems with your bone marrow. So we're going to give you a referral. And it was, less than 2 weeks later that I went in for a bone marrow biopsy, which is not a lot of fun, but got that done. Halloween 2017. And they told me at that point in time, oh, we found this, what is benign MGUS. It's a marker. And I said, why do I have all these symptoms of multiple myeloma? And they said, we don't really know. That, there's nothing wrong with you. 16 months, I got worse and worse and worse. And I finally found the specialist on the West Coast and said, can I come in for a second opinion? And she redid the test and looked at my former test, and she said, you have multiple myeloma. And I said, since when? And she said, at least 2 years. And that's when my journey really began. So I just got news last week that while remission was not in sight for me, I'm now 2 years post bone marrow transplant. I was told last week that I am in remission.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congrats for that. And
yes,
I think you kind of you didn't tell it in full details because it's a lot of pain, it's a lot of uncertainty, it's a lot of fear. Or maybe you did and you already had this mindset because you've worked with people with trauma for so long. Did you come equipped with that mindset, and did that help you deal with the thing?
I think that this is going to sound like a weird answer, but for me, when I finally had the confirmation of my diagnosis, there was some weird relief because finally somebody was listening to me and showing me the evidence of what I'd known for 3 years. The connection with the human body is, almost as important with the connection to the divine for me. And I know my body so well, and I am so highly sensitized that oftentimes I will know something long before it ever shows up in my body as a symptom. So it was some sort of weird relief. And I think maybe had I not known what was going on with me, it would have scared the bejesus out of me. But in some weird way, I thought, okay, now we are above board. Now we're beginning. Okay, what are we going to do? And, there was a little bit of time where she wanted to kind of wait and watch. And then we had the pandemic, and I ended up working 6 days a week. And then I got really, really sick. And that's when I did get a little bit afraid. And my fear was matched by her activity. And she just said, okay, it's time for a bone marrow transplant. And if you can survive that, you have good odds. And it was rough, and it came with a lot more than I was expecting. I was basically on my back for 3 months afterwards. And then I can't say I felt a whole lot better because I then did 2 years of chemotherapy to keep myself, to keep my numbers down. And they finally said, okay, your numbers are good enough and the chemotherapy has kind of damaged you enough. Let's go off of that. There is a new protocol that has just been approved. Let's try. Oh my God. like a new woman. It's incredible antibody therapy that they've come up with that doesn't have any of the problems of the chemotherapy that I was taking, and seems to be having an amazing impact. So that brings us to today.
This combined with other habits of yours, having the mindset, probably the diet as well. OMAD is good for that. Keto, for example. If you combine all of these things, I think it puts your chances of living pretty high, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, multiple myeloma is a very weird and bad cancer. It's, one of those rare cancers that does eventually put you out. But I think that with a really healthy mindset and attention to diet and exercise, nutrition, social, all of those things that allow us to live as well as we can, definitely buys time. So at this point, I'm very invested in good quality of life.
Right. And the divorce, I mean, you're a therapist, you talk to people a lot, they probably talk about their relationships. They did talk prior to your divorce. What led to it in your case? I mean, it's never like a specific case and generic advice we can give to people, but how did it happen in your case, and what insights have you got out of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll take it even further back, and that is that, I mean, I was raised by very loving people. My parents had some issues of their own, but I had grandparents who were very involved in raising me and my brother. And so I had good beginnings. Unfortunately, because I was an unusual child, I was easy to spot, and perpetrators found me, and I suffered at the hand of, more than one perpetrator. And I think in many ways, I learned that early in my life to just put my soul inside safekeeping, inside the vault. And I kept it safe there. So nobody could get that from me. Nobody could get that old soul from me. But that meant that I lived without some of the power that's involved when you are an old soul person. And it's like, okay, I didn't have the divine power source. I just had my own human power source. And, my superpowers, my X-ray vision, I couldn't see them coming. It's like I didn't see the red flags. And so I actually, suffered at the hands of many perpetrators. And so when I chose to marry, I chose familiar people, unfortunately. And one narcissist after the other. And it really broke me down. And it wasn't until I finally decided I need to stop. I need to figure this out. And as I was really trying to sort of do that deep dive on myself, I discovered there's this part of me I could have access to. What would happen if I actually opened up the vault and I tapped into that really incredible divine power inside me? And what I discovered was I could get out. And I walked away from the soul suckers in my life, which is kind of what we call them for shorthand, the people who just feed on us and for their own benefit, certainly not for mine. And I really learned a lot about why I did that. And, why as an old soul woman here I am, professional, educated woman. Why did I choose these people? But that's what old souls come to the planet to do, to uplift, to help, to serve, to heal other people. And we're also very vulnerable to being gaslit, used, guilt tripped. And once we get involved trying to help someone in that way, we can lose ourselves. And it's not that our choosers get broken, but that we keep on thinking, no, I'm supposed to help this person. No, I'm supposed to serve. No, that's my job, but not at the expense of ourselves. So the divorce actually really, really helped me learn a lot about myself and my role here and what's healthy for me to do as a woman and as an old soul woman, rather than, what is my mission? What is my divine mission? So untangling all of those pieces was really, really an important part. And I dare say I'm have not probably taken on a lot of other relationships since my divorce. Not that I wouldn't be willing, but I know what I'm looking for now. And it doesn't have anything to do with soul sucking.
Yeah, that was my exact next question that I was about to ask. Are humans meant to be in a relationship? And must also say, like, most of humanity, let's call it 80 to 90% of it, are win losers. So they want to win and they take from the other. I even see those behaviors in me, someone that self-reflects a lot and so forth, crab in the bucket sometime, not most of the time. I think I'm in a great equilibrium between giving and taking at this point. I'm more on the giving side of things. And there's like 4 questions in there. So pick whichever you want.
So as to, are humans meant to be with other humans? If you look at, all these other species, they bear their young, and their young, can either quickly fend for themselves, or they're in a relationship with the parent, some parent who gets them food, and pretty quickly they're on their own. We do not. We are born to a parent that actually has to feed us in order to survive. And yes, it doesn't necessarily have to be the birth parent, but it needs to be some adult human. So my guess is that, from probably before we're born, we are engaged to be in relationship with at least one person. And I think that leaves us with an imprint that that's what we're supposed to do. So we are affiliative people. I mean, even people like me, who I'm actually naturally an introvert. So that means, I go back to my cave in order to sort of refuel. But I have a child who is a full-on extrovert, new soul, has to be around people. Otherwise, he feels like he's dying. Wow. And, I understand it sort of with my mind, but emotionally, I'm like,
yeah, I think I'm hybrid on my side. I can do both. I've learned, I've had phases of both in my life, very introverted and very extroverted. I'm grateful to have that baggage behind me, and I've heard you speak about the love that you got when you were younger. Same to me. I'm really privileged in that aspect. I want to come back to that win-lose equation though, because my brain was telling me, like, aren't most people narcissists in that case? Because you need to put your own oxygen mask first, and I think it's mostly like a short bringing to always want to make others happy and so forth. And I had that at some points of my life. I was the class clown and the jester, and I would make people laugh, and that's why they would give me love back, and I was this popular kid and so forth. Nowadays I think I'm immune to people complaining, people hating on me, people calling me names, including my close ones. I'm just immune to that. It just bounces off. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there is some damages, but the question would be like, what's the definition of a narcissist, and when does the balance tip over into the N word, the narcissist word?
Right. It's a great question, because self-focus, even the word selfish, these are not negative things, but somehow they've become pejorative, right? They've become sort of nasty terms. You gave a great example, which is, our the travel pitch about, you must put your oxygen mask first in order to be of service to anyone else. And I would say that is 100% real. That doesn't mean that, people can't be of service and have wonderful lives. Mother Teresa never told us we have to be poor, right? That's just not real. So that engaging self-care is super important. And it isn't, as you said, this balance may not be perfect for everyone. You may do more receiving at some points of your life and less giving. You may do more giving at some points in your life and maybe less receiving. But, at the end of the day, giving and receiving are both important. Competition is important, but competition without allowing others to learn from that and you to learn from that is not of any value. Competing simply to win without any other benefit really doesn't serve anyone, other than, say, the ego, which I don't use that word a lot. But, so sort of dialing back to what is a narcissist. And I use the term toxic narcissist a lot of the time to really help people know, when did we get into the capital N word, right? When did we go over the line with that? So a narcissist in clinical language is somebody who, and I'll put it in as lay language as I can. So somebody who has this sort of huge arrogance around who they are. Their world is completely self-involved. It is at the expense of others a lot of the time. But the reason they develop that personality is typically because of some internal wound. I like to refer to it as the barking dog syndrome. So if you go out into the wild and there is an animal that has gotten caught in a trap, right? They will be fiercer than they have ever been in their lives. They will, get their fangs out. They'll make sounds. You'll be running just because of the sound they make. But it's only because they're in the trap. Otherwise, they might move off, they might study you, whatever. So narcissists are quite the same way, that they use that hot air to kind of push people away so that they don't really see that wound. Now, the toxic narcissist is somebody, and again, I'll use my shorthand, is a soul sucker, is somebody who by their nature does not have their own sense of energy, right? They have to feed on someone else. So there is a dependency, it's a hostile one at that they have to continuously have in their pipeline people they can feed on. And if you just make it man to woman, and that's just simplicity alone here. But if you have a man feeding on, an old soul woman, because we old soul women, that's like big soul energy, right? We're like nirvana of energy. And so when you just feed on someone and it is dependently, eventually that person begins to feel, used and smaller and deflated and depleted, And if they're not tapping into that soul, into the divine, they're getting used up, and they will basically sort of fall prey to whatever that person says goes. Now, I will tell you right now, I have quite a few clients right now where it's flipped. So it's a woman preying on a man. So I just said it is for simplicity that we talk about it as male, female, but right now, I have more women who are soul sucking on old soul men.
Yeah.
And, so it isn't just a male on female thing.
And that was my next question.
Yeah.
Like what are the case studies or the usual dynamic of a man on a woman and a woman on a man? The man, is it like, hey, go make me a sandwich, you cook the food? And the woman, is it like, I always want to spend time with you, you're not there for the kids? What are like the constant dynamic of abuse of men on women and women on men?
Yeah. So in what I do, I've actually come up with 5 archetype of old soul women, and these 5 archetypes, and you pulled out one that is the harmonizer, is often drawn to a certain kind of narcissist. And as he begins to feed and begins to sort of bring her into the world he desires, that's more like the trophy wife, right? Serve the dinner on time, make sure the kids look good, you go to the gym, you look good and I want you wearing this, not that. The house has to be pristine, the friends and making the friends has to be pristine. You have to have so many dinner parties or barbecues or blah, 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 right? That's sort of a classic harmonizer, disempowered harmonizer. And he might be a financial advisor, or, he may have sort of the big career and want to keep her at home to manage all of those things that he likes to show the world. I have this house, I have this wife, I have these kids, they go to this school, so on and so forth. And as she is breaking down, then she no longer orients to who she was before. She buys into whatever his story is, whatever his truth is, and she begins to forget herself. Oftentimes I'm asked, why don't these women leave? And the reality is they're exhausted, number one. They probably don't have a lot of access to the funds. And the third thing is they've forgotten who they are. They don't even know where they should go or what they should do. They literally don't remember who they were before.
Most of the time they wait for the kids to leave.
Yes, it's usually when something happens between the narcissist and the child. When the narcissist starts trying to feed on the children, right, then it alerts something in her brain. There's something primitive, and she says, "Uh-oh, this is not good," because these are my babies. And that is typically when women will leave. And classically, if they've left, they might start dating another narcissist, which is around the time they start coming to me because they say, I don't understand why I'm doing it again. I don't want to do it again.
It's protection, right? Is like, can he protect me from this other narcissist?
Yes.
And only another narcissist can protect from another narcissist.
Right. There you go. You have a good understanding of it. I think what I noticed, a lot of the elements are very similar when it's men, old soul men who are being, used or gaslit by a female narcissist. She might have the big job or not necessarily. She might be staying at home, but she's definitely pulling all of the cards. She is definitely in control of the world. She probably has access to his bank account. She's probably maybe gives him a stipend, an allowance. She's definitely still calling the shots. She will shrink him down to the size that she needs to in order to control him. So gaslighting, especially for a female narcissist, becomes really the way that they take control.
Gaslighting, being like threats, right? Tell me a bit more about gaslighting precisely.
Right. I think it's the emotional abuse that gets turned on, and I'm only going to use the word victim just so you understand who I'm talking about. Not a word I use a lot, but where the emotional abuse is, or criticisms, guilt tripping is used on the victim, and the victim is made to believe that it is their fault.
Right. I'm seeing one clear dynamic here, and it's like two energies, and there's one stronger than the other. Like me and my wife were both strong-willed, both entrepreneurs, and we clash often. But I think it's healthy that we clash and we maintain some kind of very strong middle. In Harry Potter, like they have the coming out of the wand.
Right.
And it's both like strong energy, which I think is an equilibrium, because if she would be weak, I think I'd have way too much energy for her. Just like the same dynamics with my employees. I can't be around people that don't have that strongness in them, to push back. Because, my employees, most of the time, they don't want, and I don't have employees, actually, I let them all go, sadly and happily for me. But yeah, sometimes it was just too much for them, and they wouldn't tell me the truth, they wouldn't give me any feedback because my energy is like a bit too powerful. But any thoughts on this to close off?
I think that, as for marriage, contract for what you want and need, both of you. You come together, you make a decision. If you're both very strong-willed people, then what is the protocol for working together? When you do butt heads, how do you resolve? And as long as it's very clear, there's no problem. That doesn't have to be an issue. The same can be said for in a workplace. If there are big energies, what is the protocol for working together and collaborating? And, it just has to be out loud, right? It has to be above board. It's when it sinks below and it operates below the surface that we have problems.
Right. Very good advice. And yeah, fun fact, like usually it's verbal arguments, and the energy gets quite high. And I found out that conversations on iMessage are a way for us to solve stuff, boom, message, reply, boom, message, reply. And it's really clear in both of our brains. So yeah, different style of communications. And as usual, I usually say to folks here on this pod to A/B test, to try out a bunch of things and see what sticks, what works, measure the outcome, and try to have some kind of scientific framework around it. Dr. Sage, thank you a lot for sharing that wisdom today. I will invite you to round two because we haven't scratched the surface yet, but we still delivered lots of value today. Where can people find out more about you till then?
sagebreslin.com is my master website. And if they want to take the quiz to see what kind of old soul woman they are, they can go right to oldsoulwomen.com and take the quiz from there. It's fun. It's 8 questions. Great way to just learn more about yourself.
Thank you so much. That was Dr. Sage Breslin and Charles Cormier for another Founder Wisdom podcast.